Would you like to play some football?
Welcome to another edition of Gridiron and the Gospel of Faith in College Football podcast. And this could actually be an emergency podcast, but it's not. We did that when Nick Saban retired. We have not done it yet when coaches get whacked. But that's, and I don't know if whacked is the word I want, because that's an old, isn't that one of those old
time of year, man? It is that time of year.
Yeah. So George Schroeder here, Dean and Sarah as well. We're glad to be with you guys. Week 9 just says college football is wild and wacky. There were great football games, and we learned a little bit more about some teams. And we lost another high-level coach, another exit, Brian Kelly, as we record on Sunday night, which is when we typically record these, not all the time, but typically. As we record this, multiple news outlets are reporting that he has been fired by LSU after an embarrassing home loss by Texas A&M, or to Texas A&M. Embarrassing. Texas A&M scored 35 points and blew them out in the second half, scored 35 points in the second half, or 35 consecutive points, blew them off the field. By the end of the game, Death Valley Tiger Stadium looked like Kyle Field East. That's not my line. That's a friend of mine's line, but Kyle Field East. They just got embarrassed. Third loss in 4 games. Terrible, terrible offense. Just not what anybody expected from LSU. But this is the new world. This is the new world. $53 million buyout. Okay. So Brian Kelly, and after last night, when I watched that game and you saw it unfolding, I really wasn't surprised because of the new era and because it's LSU. Let's be honest. LSU is its own special animal, tiger. And those guys have this unique cultural, where places care about football, there's something more intense in the fabric of LSU than some other places. But your thoughts on Brian Kelly, as we speak, apparently is no longer the coach at LSU.
You know, Brian Kelly has won everywhere he's gone. You know, he won at the Division II level. He won at Central Michigan. He won at Cincinnati. He won at Notre Dame. So it's not like Brian Kelly forgot how to coach. But I think fit matters in anything. We're in ministry. We're on church staffs. Fit matters for church staff members.
Right. That's right.
You got the best seminary pedigree, even preach the best sermons, but you got to be able to have a right fit to the church or the ministry organization. For those who are listening that are, work for businesses, fits matter. And it just from day one, and I don't even mean the fake Cajun accent thing. I mean, even beyond that,
it
was obviously a home. That was something, but it was a home run hire in terms of like best coaches out there. He was in the upper echelon of best college football coaches. But in terms of the fit, I think most people are like, how's that going to work? Like, that's going to be interesting. And not the SEC thing, because Urban Meyer didn't have SEC. Nick Saban before he went to LSU the first time. Les Miles went from Oklahoma State to LSU. Mark Richt was not in the SEC. I mean, that thing is so overblown. Cliff Lee was not in the SEC, and he's got a chance to go all the way to the championship. So that stuff's overblown. I mean, just fit in general for that particular school. I could have seen him at the University of Florida, Brian Kelly, sure. But something about him being at LSU, so I'm just not surprised that it ended this way. It was pretty quick, at least, too. What are we, 2.5 years in? 3 years in?
3 years in. He's 34 and 14, so how many years is that? This is his 4th season.
And another thing
3.5 years.
To me, just how college football is just so bizarre sometimes. His 2 defensive coordinators at Notre Dame, Lee and Marcus Freeman, have had tremendous success as head coaches. Yet Kelly, the guy, is without a job.
Well, I'll give you another stat. He has just lost consecutive games to Vanderbilt and to Texas A&M, which are both coached by former coordinators of his.
That's right.
And Lee,
Elko's at Notre Dame.
Mike Elko for A&M.
Wow.
And I mean, look, the deal, and I want to talk a little bit more about the fit. This is what you need to know about LSU and how intense it is, and it's just its own special animal. Okay, the Louisiana governor Jeff Landry tweeted Saturday night after the game about how it was. He basically tweeted, I don't have it in front of me, but something to the effect of the season ticket price increase that they had announced the day before the game for 2026, that was really poor timing. And he's right about that, but typically governors don't get into that kind of thing. And then he was involved supposedly in sort of some of these talks with the big money folks and the power boosters, just sort of the power people around the situation as things escalated last night and then today. They're going to have to pay a $53 million buyout, although it does have a mitigation clause. But he was involved in all the, should we get rid of him? How do we manage getting rid of him? The governor of the state, now I realize it's in Baton Rouge. But that's a little different. Can you imagine Ron DeSantis doing that with Florida or Florida State? I mean, as much as your governor likes to sort of
He
sometimes
loves
be out
football.
there.
That'd be something. I said Cliff Lee by accident. Cliff Lee, longtime major league pitcher. I meant to say Clark Lee. Sorry, at Vanderbilt. But it's just one of those things where it's a different ball game, and it really does just mean more when the governor of the state is involved and a coach getting let go.
It just means more at LSU than it does at some of the other places in the SEC. That's what's going on here.
Yeah, they're in the upper echelon of who cares the most.
That's right.
LSU fans. Who do you think goes there? It's a huge opening. The biggest opening there can be.
We were joking in our extensive pre-show preparation that, Ole Miss coach Lane Kiffin is now headed to 3 or 4 or 5 different jobs, or he may stay at the place he's at. But Florida is like supposedly wanting him. And there was at least one report, and I don't know how much credence to give it, that he had, there was an offer on the table. These things are usually crazy, these kinds of reports. And I'm always careful about that. But the Florida fans would like Lane Kiffin. I think the LSU fans would like Lane Kiffin. And the Ole Miss fans dearly want to keep Lane Kiffin. And I'm not sure that you have to go to LSU or Florida from Ole Miss like you might have 5 years ago. So I don't know what will happen. But I would toss his name out there.
As long as you have NIL support, in the assistant coaching pool salary that you need, you can win anywhere now. Mm-hmm. And I do think one thing is for sure that we can all agree on, everyone listening, is that next year Lane Kiffin will be the highest paid coach in college football, wherever that is. That's right. Wherever that is.
Regardless of how the Rebels finished the year, and they had a nice win in Norman yesterday at OU. Regardless of they look like their schedule from here on out is much less than some of the other playoff contenders. But regardless of how they finish the rest of the year, I think that's exactly right. He's probably the highest paid coach in college football in 2026, wherever he
Oxford or somewhere else, Gainesville, in Baton Rouge. I don't know why, but my gut is Oxford. Yep. I have no reason. I have no insider info, but just my gut says he stays.
So the word that I think the word of the moment when it comes to coaches and programs is alignment. And alignment now means, do you have your sort of NIL sort of collective do you have the right general manager? That's a new thing in college football. Do you have the alignment with it used to be, did you have your president, your athletic director, and your coach together? Now it's all those guys plus the collectives, plus how does the general manager fit in? How do you procure the right players, pay them what you're supposed to pay them, what you need to pay them, and then get that going? And I think he thinks that Ole Miss has got a pretty good alignment. And why can't you not just get to the playoff? Why can't you win it?
Oh, yeah. Ole Miss? They're going to the playoff this year. And when they're in there, I mean, why would you
why couldn't they win it this year? And I can tell you why, because they don't have their defense is not very good. But it's not like there's a whole bunch of teams that are head and shoulders above everybody else. Maybe Ohio State, maybe the team that beat LSU, Texas A&M, they're really starting to impress me. But is anybody else head and shoulders above the rest of the world? And Ohio State's schedule is such, it's hard to know.
Hey, don't rule out those Indiana Hoosiers.
You're right, but it's so hard to believe that and fathom that. All right, who else? So Lane Kiffin, he's up for every job that's open.
I think Nick Saban gets a phone call. He's going to say no. He's having
he's going to say no because that's why he left Alabama. He didn't like the new world, world order.
Just because LSU fans are obsessed with him, Joe Brady.
They are obsessed with him, and I think that would end up being a bad move.
Yeah, but still, there's something about him. I think they dream about him at night to this day.
I got one for you, and we mentioned him earlier, and he beat him a week ago. Clark Lee. Not Cliff Lee, but Clark Lee.
Hey, Cliff Lee was a great lefty. Indians and Phillies.
Look, Vanderbilt is still not. I mean, Ole Miss is at a different tier in terms of alignment and ability to get there. Vanderbilt has done unbelievable things, but I'm not, and they may make the playoff. But if you're wanting to win at the highest of levels, you may need to take that next step at some point. And I'm not.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of rules. You don't go group of 5 to LSU. So rule out any of the group of 5 head coaches. No offense to those guys.
So no John Sumrall moving up the road from New Orleans.
No, and no North Texas or Memphis or that rarely works, as we've seen recently. It's just a little too big of a stage. I think the next step is coordinator at a major Power 4. Preferably
maybe you might get a sitting head coach, but it could be coordinator.
For LSU, I mean, you can shoot for the moon. You can call anybody you want. So that's why Clark Lee does make sense. I mean, I would. I mean, why not? I'd take a look at Lincoln Riley. You're LSU. I mean, you have a chance. You can basically go offer anyone you want, and they can say no.
There were
Obviously.
thoughts they might go after Lincoln Riley at the time that USC was involved trying to get him. If you recall, that's when that job was open. Both of those jobs, the USC job and the LSU job, were open at the same time 4 years ago. And, Lincoln Riley's name was being floated for both, and he was denying both vociferously while he was still at OU, and then of course he ended up at USC. And he might like a nice little ejector seat, but he obviously doesn't have the same cachet that he had, but that would still be a kind of a salvaging type of hire.
What about Jeff Brom?
Yeah. I've heard his name floated for Florida too. And obviously he's a Louisville guy and just, through and through, right? Home, family, place of where he played, all that kind of stuff. But, can you go to the playoff at Louisville? Yes. Can you win the whole thing at Louisville? I don't think so. So, yeah, no, I mean, those are the kinds of names that you ought to be thinking about. I would, I had one in the tip of my tongue and I've lost it, but just, it's going to be fascinating. And here's the thing. I joked with somebody earlier today. It's easier now to just run down the list of schools that still have head coaches than it is the ones that don't, because it just keeps growing. I mean, we're at like 10 or 11 or 12 and there are more coming. There are more coming.
College football's gotten crazy with that. I mean, it really is part of the college football culture now, is firing coaches quickly.
Yeah. And so what that means is there aren't enough coaches that sort of are going to be fitting the bill, at least based on what fan expectations are, which are a lot of times off. The guys they think make sense and that sort of win the press conference aren't necessarily the right guys. But there's going to be some that sort of get, it's like musical chairs, and there's too few candidates that make sense and too many open jobs. I guess that's like the opposite of musical chairs, but you know what I'm saying.
I've got a name for you that you're not going to like because of your fandom of your son's favorite team. What about Dan Lanning?
I think he's going to get a call. I think Dan Lanning is and my son's not going to like this either, is the next coach at Alabama at some point. Okay. I don't think Kalen DeBoer's going anywhere. I think they might win. They've got a chance, although they weren't very convincing yesterday. They got a chance to win the national title along with 8 other teams this year, but they're heading to the playoff probably. But I think he's the next coach at Alabama.
Another coach I could see head south, the Florida job especially, is Jedd Fisch.
That he's going to get a lot of look because what he's done, what he did at Arizona, and then what he's doing at Washington are really good. He's not as well known to the average college football fan, but he's a really good football coach, and he seems to be figuring out the new era, and that's the biggest piece of this. Go back to Lanning for a second. I actually think, because his name has popped up in relation to things like Penn State or Florida. So basically, Penn State, Florida, and LSU, those are huge jobs that are wide open right now. But I think Lanning thinks you can do everything anybody wants to do at Oregon. And it's not depending on Phil Knight not passing away. He's in his late 80s. It's just the alignment is there, and they're always going to have the crazy money to do what you have to do.
Yeah, and California's just down the coast, and that's rich high school football there. So you have the talent pool not too far away.
Yeah, you can pretty much go anywhere because you're going to promise to pay them a lot, and they're going to end up with either Phil Knight and they have a couple other huge boosters, not Phil Knight level, but close. You're going to end up with some of them pulling the strings for you, or you're going to end up with some giant bequeathal. Is that how you say that?
I'm not even sure.
I don't know.
That's way beyond my pay
grade. Once he moves to the next stage.
Is Venables in trouble?
I wouldn't say Venables is in trouble now, but I would say at 6-2, they have as tough a schedule left as anybody in the country, and that's a real possibility that he could be kind of at least. I think he'll make it, but I think they could be on the hot seat.
If he finishes 8-4, is that hot seat?
No, I don't think so. Okay. I don't think it's great because I think, especially because they started the season, 5-0 and felt pretty good. And, but there's you can point to the thumb injury and say Mateer hadn't been the same since then. And I don't know if that's legit. I think that was clearly legit against Texas. I don't know if that's legit because he just flat missed some guys or they maybe win the game the other day against Ole Miss. But you can point back to the thumb injury and say that hurt some things. But I don't think he's in trouble. But how can you rule anything out at this point, right? And it all depends on what happens in the last 5 games of the season for them.
And then the carousel happens, obviously. So if Matt Rule goes back home to Penn State, then Nebraska's, it's just, if someone I think a group of 5 head coach goes to Oklahoma State.
Yeah. Oklahoma State, sadly, and the Arkansas of the world. It's better to be Arkansas because you're in the SEC, but the Oklahoma States and Arkansas of the world are on the outside looking in. And when it comes to all the coaches you'd like to have. Now, that said, and I would not recommend this, but there's a couple of coaches who were recently fired who are available who might want to coach. One of them is James Franklin.
Sure.
He's got probably the better profile right now. The other one is Brian Kelly. And so, I'm just not, look, I've been around Brian Kelly a little bit when he was at Notre Dame. Wasn't around him at LSU because that was after my time, but been around him a little bit. I'm not a big fan, and I really don't like his sideline demeanor. His sideline demeanor screams, "I've never made a mistake," but all of you people,
very smug. Smug is the
how
word.
come you people, you quarterback, you receiver, my assistant coaches, how come you people keep screwing up? That's his sideline demeanor, and it's really unbecoming, frankly. But if that's who you are in public with the cameras on you, you can't like keep yourself from doing that. What do you like behind closed doors? That's been always my thought. So
yeah, it's fascinating to me that he can recruit just that demeanor. I'm trying to picture him going to a living room compared to Dabo going in a living room. Just the difference personality.
Both of those guys are available, though. Yeah, that's the thing.
James Franklin, to me, a great place for him to land would be Virginia Tech.
Yeah. I forgot that one's open too.
I can see him.
Oh my goodness, there's so many open.
So many.
So
Florida State is coming, most likely. Is the word.
Probably.
So you're Florida State, you're Virginia Tech, and the Florida State as a program is obviously a level above them. You're competing now for the next head coach with LSU, Penn State, maybe Auburn, Florida. I mean, that's going to be tough to get the guy that you want.
Yeah, no, it really is. And that's the problem. That's the problem with all this. I think you could do worse. And I know LSU's not going to do this if you were Florida or Florida State, if it were to open. Auburn is likely going to open, although they got to win at a mediocre Arkansas team whose coach is already gone. They got to win on the road in Fayetteville. But I think Hugh Freeze is likely to not make it. But if you're James Franklin, or if you're, I actually think a nice landing spot for him, and I don't know that they could pull the trigger, but with the coaching merry-go-round, and if Lane Kiffin stays or goes to LSU or whatever, I think Florida would be a good landing spot for James Franklin. Now, he's been in the SEC. Now, if you're hiring a coach whose rap is he can't win the big one, I guess in your Florida, and you think you're supposed to win the big one, that's a problem. But they haven't been winning the small ones a ton at Florida.
And so it's hard to justify hiring somebody that it's for a big time job that's their reputation.
I don't disagree. The problem is who you're going to get.
And when's Colorado going to be opened?
That's more about Dion and whether he wants to keep doing it. But boy, did they get their doors blown off at Utah. 53-7. It was 43-0 at halftime. They had minus 18 yards.
I'm sorry. I know we're supposed to be loving on this podcast. I can't help but love to see it. After they beat TCU, they didn't even make a bowl game that year as the year went on. And we were lectured that we didn't believe and didn't have faith and all these kind of things from a last-second win against TCU. And they have been they were decent last year, but they are absolutely terrible.
Yep. Fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness. I'm messing with you, but no, I mean, you're right. And he was like keeping receipts and that kind of stuff. Speaking of which, LSU beat a 6-6 Oklahoma team in whatever bowl game that was last year. And Brian Kelly said, "We're taking receipts and we'll see you at the national championship."
Boy.
So he was feeling his oats after beating what we all saw was a pretty bad Oklahoma team with no quarterback and no receivers, and bowl games are bowl games these days if you're not in the playoff, but you don't even know who's playing. But he was feeling his oats, and he said in the offseason that they tripled their NIL, went up to 18 million, which apparently they were only paying 6 last year. And it's like, okay, there's part of your problem, LSU. But they tripled their NIL. They were going to compete with everybody, and then they didn't compete with hardly anybody. And I don't know.
Another name about getting a big job is Drink at Missouri. I can see him landing a little.
I think that's right. Clark Lee and Eli Drinkwitz, both of those guys are doing really good jobs there. Drinkwitz, a Gus Malzahn protege, but both of those guys are doing really good jobs at their two schools, Vandy and Missouri, respectively. And both of them are in positions where you might not say, it doesn't even matter what the alignment is, there probably is still a ceiling a little shy of a national title. You probably get to the playoff, but you're probably not winning a national title. And so if a big boy calls, you probably have to head that way.
And one more name to throw out there is Dillingham at Arizona State.
Yeah, Kenny Dillingham is a good one.
That's my short list of guys that can come south.
All right, so you guys heard it here first.
And by South, I mean Arkansas, Florida, LSU, Auburn, if that opens up, like Florida State, if that opens up, those
Yep.
schools.
Yep. Look, there's some other schools there's other schools that are kind of off the radar right now just because they're not at the same echelon that I think could open. Baylor could open.
Colorado State's open, Oklahoma State's open.
So obviously Stanford is open unless unless Andrew Luck
hope he
decides Frank Reich
stays.
sticks around.
I like to see. I like to see him stay.
Yeah. UCLA is open. I mean, that's not a great job, but it's a decent job, and it's in one of the two Power 2 conferences, so that's a big deal. So, all right, couple things we should probably talk about a little bit because we've just talked about. I mean, this is the thing. This is crazy. Now, we at least almost got to November with this coach firing because they've started in, what September or whatever, but certainly early October. But so on the field, Alabama and Texas had great escapes. Alabama had to come back at Columbia, South Carolina, and beat South Carolina, a South Carolina team that's not very good this year, and they did it. Congratulations to them. And that doesn't say a ton for me about what they can do going forward, other than they survived in advance. And last year they lost that game, so that says good things to me. I don't know what I think their top level capability is. Texas had to go to overtime, and they had to have a miracle escape and to get to overtime and then win in overtime at Mississippi State, which is still looking for its first SEC win, better than they were a year ago. It's the second overtime escape on the road against a bad SEC team by Texas. And if you're having trouble, you're beating them, but if you're having trouble beating these teams, even on the road, you have to go to overtime to beat the bad SEC teams. What does that say about what kind of SEC team you are? And the schedule is about to get tougher. They've got Vanderbilt and Georgia and Texas A&M still on their schedule. That doesn't bode well for the Horns. But those were two entertaining games. Miami rebounded and did what they had to do against Stanford. That's what you expect.
Second half,
absolutely. Dominant. But the game that I think was the one, and Ole Miss Oklahoma was a good game between two ranked teams. That'll be that was a very good win for Ole Miss. It's a bad loss for Oklahoma, but it's not debilitating. It's just that they have a really tough schedule going forward. The game that was big was the on the field part of what Texas A&M did, because they made some mistakes, self-inflicted wounds, a couple of picks that Marcel Reed, the quarterback, who's really good, threw in the first half, led to points for LSU and prevented points for Texas A&M. And they're down 18-14 at Tiger Stadium. And you're like, okay, they're 7-0. Is this where the Aggies look like what we've come to expect of the Aggies a lot of times? And the answer is no. They're built different. And they took the second half and went crazy, just dominated on both sides of the ball and on special teams. And just 35 consecutive points, it was over. And then there was a late touchdown that wasn't even cosmetic by LSU that nobody cared. And as I said in the opener, there were so few LSU fans in the stands that the 5,000 or 6,000 Texas A&M fans were, moving down towards the bottom of the stadium, towards the field level, and making lots of noise.
They're having Friday yell practice in there.
Yeah. I mean, A&M is really good. They've got a really good defense, which you expect with Elko, and you kind of expect out of Texas A&M a lot of years. But I think the difference, and they're fast. They're really fast on both sides of the ball. But I think the difference maker is Marcel Reed, and I don't think I gave him nearly enough credit for how good he can be. Now, he made a couple of those were bad mistakes, but that guy's a difference maker.
Yeah, they haven't had a true difference maker like that, like a lasting difference maker since Manziel at quarterback. They've had guys with some ability, but no one that like legit was like, okay, this is the guy, and he's going to lead us to a new place. And Elko is just the real deal. What a great hire! What he did at Duke was very impressive, and to me, like they have to be considered a favorite, along with Ohio State, to go all the way.
Yeah, no, that's my thought. If you want to say Ohio State's still the best team in the country, number one, because they're doing what they're supposed to do against that schedule, great. I think that schedule is so bad that they better keep doing what they're supposed to do, or I wouldn't call them number one. But A&M is doing it against a tougher schedule, a much tougher schedule this point.
It's also really hard to win back-to-back. So the odds of Ohio State winning the national championship, just based on history, it's really hard to win back-to-back.
I agree with that. I'm just saying, as we look at these teams this year, why wouldn't you say A&M might be the best team in the country right now? And I know you mentioned Indiana. All they do is keep beating people too, and looking really good when they do it. And so I'm not trying to slight those guys at all. But man, I was really impressed with Texas A&M, and I may be late to the party, and I'll join like a lot of other people's. I'll join late. Maybe they'll let me on the bandwagon or not, but I'm rolling with them now, and not just because our church is filled with Aggies here down here in Texas. I think they're really good.
I'm fully buying. Fully.
Yeah. Vandy nips Mizzou in a battle of ranked teams. That was a good win. Terrible news for Mizzou that Bo Pribula, the quarterback, has a dislocated ankle that apparently requires surgery. But as you said earlier, I think I did too. I think Vandy's they're clearly playoff good. Not saying they'll get there, but boy, they sure look like they might.
I don't see them beating Tennessee, but maybe. And that game, the first half, what a boring game. It was like 3-3 or something like that forever. Yeah, but I think it's cool they had game day there. I was hoping game day this week would go to North Texas Navy.
Yeah, but they're in Salt Lake City.
Yeah, which
so
is
they're
cool.
At least broken free of the kind of the usual places. Not that Nashville was the usual
free
place.
school rotation.
Yeah. They're in Salt Lake City where, who is it? Is it Houston at Utah? Is that who it is? I can't remember.
It's Cincinnati.
It's Cincinnati at Utah. That's right.
Yeah, who's 6-1?
Yep. And Cincinnati and BYU are the only two teams unbeaten in the Big 12 conference. BYU is obviously unbeaten. Speaking of that, by the way, when I said Houston, Connor Wegman, former A&M quarterback, is lighting it up for them. Georgia Tech, Haynes King is lighting it up for them, former A&M quarterback. So they've had quarterbacks, but they didn't thrive there. They're thriving other places, and Marcel Reed is clearly the guy that they needed to go A&M. But Georgia Tech 8-0 for the first time in 59 years.
Yeah, man, they're well coached. They're tough. They're not going to be explosive. They want to grind the ball. So I'm not sure how that's going to measure up against a big time opponent that they're not going to be able to keep from scoring big plays. But they keep being tested. They keep winning. If they beat Georgia or not doesn't really matter, because I think an 11-1 Georgia Tech team with a loss to Georgia, who's if they win, I think they would probably need to make the ACC championship. But if they don't make, I think there's still a chance that they could get in. They've been a really good team all year.
All right, I'm going to give you two more names that make no sense for LSU or Florida or Penn State. We already talked about it for Penn State, but Cignetti, despite the giant money they gave him, and he's too old, is what people are going to say. But Willie Fritz at Houston, all he does is win. That's all he does. He just wins. And nobody's gonna go, oh, we should get him. But I'm just telling you, if you dropped him at LSU, all he's going to do is win. If you dropped him into that coach's office.
And Indiana gave him a shot.
Yep. Yeah, he's, 63, 64? Is he that old? Maybe something like that. But, yeah. So, so much. Anything else capture your attention over the weekend in terms of just the on-the-field stuff? Obviously, what's happened after Saturday night and then here into Sunday with the firing is the thing. But
yeah, some games that don't catch the national radar. North Carolina and Virginia going overtime. Belichick almost got the big win against Virginia, which in the ACC is a big game. And also Wake Forest beat SMU.
Yeah, that's big. And that sort of puts a little bit of a damper on Miami going to SMU this week, which I thought about going to watch. I may still. I know. I don't know for sure. There may be another plan I have.
So what's out for your schedule for Sunday? Don't get back too late. Another thing, I'm a college football history and tradition total nerd. I love the trophy games. So this week we had several of those great rivalry trophy games. We had the battle for the bronze boot, the border war in Colorado State versus Wyoming. Wyoming shut them out. Iowa took home the pig and the Floyd of Rosedale game against Minnesota. And then we had Michigan State for Paul Bunyan's trophy, not to be confused with Paul Bunyan's axe in the Wisconsin game. But Michigan beat Michigan State pretty bad. So we had some good trophy games happen. I just love those games, love those rivalries, and they matter in college football. So it makes college football.
They're so good, and they do matter. North Dakota State beat South Dakota State. Is that what it was? I always get them mixed up, but North Dakota State beat the number 1 team, beat the number 2 team at FCS level, and they beat them badly, and that means something. So there were some good games out there, and some interesting stuff. One other thing going on here too. If you were to start talking about all the teams right now that have a shot at the playoff, not even if we were to narrow it down and say some of them didn't, not that their fans think they do, but we think they do. They're at like 22 teams, 23, 24 teams, maybe 25. And they're not all in the top 25. But that's one of the things that they were trying to do when they expanded the playoff. And I was not a big fan of expansion. If you were going to do it, I thought 8 was right. I definitely am not going to be excited if they go to 14 or 16. Let me change that. When they go to 14 or 16. But one of the things they were trying to do was keep more teams in it longer, and that's been accomplished. So I don't know. It was a ton of fun. So as we keep moving forward to next week, there's not a ton of games on the schedule that just stack up. That said, that just usually means it's wacky. But Vandy, ranked number 9, still takes some getting used to, is at number 20.
I think Texas wins that game.
I do too. And I'll tell you why. Because Vanderbilt, if they had, I love the Diego Pavia story. And he's not listening to this podcast probably, but if he were, he would be very unhappy, and he would do one of those Baker Mayfield things and write our names down on a list. You said they wouldn't beat Tennessee and Texas. I'm saying they won't beat Texas. But they're not. Their offense is not just explosive. They're just a well-formed team. Texas has really good defense, a really good defense. Their offense is, who knows? By the way, Arch Manning apparently went into concussion protocol, so you don't really know what that means going forward.
That's right. I forgot about that. Okay, that's a fact.
We don't know what that's going to look like by the time some of y'all listen to this. You'll have a better feel for it. But even so, I just think Texas at home probably wins that game. I don't think Texas beats Georgia. I don't think Texas at home beats Texas A&M. Not based on what we've seen from Texas A&M, but I think they get Vandy. Oklahoma, after that loss, goes to Tennessee. I don't think that looks good for Oklahoma. Now, they may put it together on offense at some point, and if they do, their defense is as good as anybody's in the country. It's really good.
And outside of Vanderbilt, I think that's the only really legitimate win Tennessee has a shot at.
Yeah.
You look at their schedule. I mean, they've played 2 good teams and lost to both of them. So we're going to have them shoved down our face come playoff time, and we're going to be told that they should be in the playoffs because of their SEC schedule when they have played 2 good teams and lost to both of them. So Oklahoma, for them, is critical. Obviously, if they lose the 3 losses, they're out in general.
Right.
They don't have an impressive resume, so they need to whip Oklahoma.
Right. And same thing for Oklahoma. They would be one of those 24 teams that we were just talking about that still has a shot at the playoff. I don't think their path is very good because it's really difficult. They still have Alabama on the schedule. Let's see. They go to Alabama. LSU comes to Norman. That doesn't seem like what it was before, 5 weeks ago or something. But they still have a really difficult schedule. And going to Knoxville is not going to be easy for them. But they still got a path to the playoff too, obviously. But they don't really have any margin because they now have 2 losses. All right, the game day game is number 17 Cincinnati at number 24 Utah. I think that's going to be a fun one.
I think it's great.
Yeah. So whenever they get to the West Coast or out to one of those places where they're not usually at, that's when I love game day the most for the setting. Game day is growing on me. I do want to say one thing on this side of the podcast about it. It's what I mean by it's growing on me is I miss the Corso days, and I'm not a giant fan of McAfee, and we've talked about that before. But it's growing on me because I think it's just they're getting a synergy, and I think Nick Saban is really getting much, much better at being loose and having fun with it, and it's pretty apparent he's enjoying it, and he brings a ton of knowledge to it's a little bit like when Lane Kiffin joined his squad as offensive coordinator, but the difference is he could actually finally pull rank on Lane Kiffin. He can't do anything to McAfee. McAfee makes more money than he does on the show, but it's a little bit like that, and so there's some frustration there. But it's pretty clear it's loosened him up. Here's my bone to pick with game day. And look, this is something that was set in motion years ago, and they've just added to it. But in light of the FBI investigation that has caught in its dragnet current and former NBA players and coaches about sports gambling, the emphasis, and that's what it is, that game day has on sports gambling. They're picking games against, they have a super dog section, and they're picking their picks are made against the spread, not just straight up anymore. And that emphasis really, really is a bad look, and it's a bad thing, but I'm saying the optics of it are bad too. I think it's a bad thing in general because sports gambling is under the surface a real problem in our culture, and it's only grown and grown and grown since the Supreme Court made it legal beyond certain places.
Well, let's make this part of our faith segment, because this is gridiron and in the gospel. For those listening out there, I know it's not a lot of, it's all over the map. We have some pastors, we have some just football fans in general, all over the map. But just know there are people in your church family whose marriages are struggling because of gambling, right? There's decisions that are being made oftentimes that are against the spouse's wishes, that can become addictive, that can be financially harmful, that are careless, reckless, not just kind of a little fun. Hey, I'm putting $5 on the North Texas game, but things that have spiraled out of control for a lot of people. Just know that in your kind of vicinity, what's people that are just adjacent to you, and there's probably there's two things we could always be mindful of. And that's people that have maybe some sort of pornography issue, and
Mm-hmm.
people who have a gambling issue. And that's not something we've talked about for a very long time in faith circles, because when you think of gambling, you think of just like Vegas, or somebody got too carried away on a trip, something along those lines, or a once a year guys poker night, they went too far, that kind of thing. We don't realize that now, because of our phones, because of technology, there are people who are engaged in it all the time. And it's really wreaking some havoc on people in their lives and their marriages and their families.
And guys, dads especially, you need to watch your sons,
Yeah, absolutely.
because
Yep.
if your sons are sports fans, the gambling pops up on the apps on their phone, even if that's
Fantasy
not what they're going
football.
for, and it's easy to jump into it.
Fantasy
Um,
football, you got to be careful of it. What's on the line for their fantasy teams. Yeah, so I just think if we're going to be serious about leading our homes, we just have to be really careful attention. If you are somebody who maybe you're willing to admit this gotten a little bit out of control, please go talk to somebody. I mean, just talk to a trusted friend even, and say, hey, can you hold me accountable here?
yeah. Uh,
Apologize to your spouse and say, hey, I'm sorry it's gotten to this level. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm deleting the app off my phone. And I'm just going to be a football fan. I'm not going to put money on it anymore as much as you want to or attempted to. It's a real thing, George. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, and I'm just saying, look, I think you're right. Trusted friend, obviously your spouse, that's huge. Accountability is huge. And I would just suggest one other thing, man, you should go to your pastor, because he wants to help you. And also that may help him understand that there's a problem in his
You might not be aware of it.
right. And so it's not that yeah, anyway. So, well, I tell you what, let's do. Let's go ahead and take a quick break, head to the halftime locker room here, and come back. And second half, we will talk about faith, our shared faith in Christ. So, Gridiron the Gospel will be right back right after this. Second half of Gridiron and the Gospel of Faith in College Football podcast starts right now. I'm George Schroeder. He's Dean and Sarah. And this second half is centered on faith, focused on the gospel, focused on Jesus Christ. Dean and I both want, more than anything, for this podcast to be a vehicle to tell you guys about the faith that God has given us, and that we hope you share with us, and we want you to share with us. And so thanks for sticking around for the second half. We appreciate that. Dean, I know there's more than one thing on your mind, and obviously we were just talking, it sort of morphed toward faith at the end of the football segment. We talked about sports gambling, but you've got some stuff on your mind, on your heart. So what's going on?
Yeah, you talk about the gospel. I mean, we have really good news that we share and we hold to, called the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, what he came to do for sinners through his death and resurrection. Better news than any new coaching hire can be, no matter who it is, no better news than your school getting Lane Kiffin. Is the fact that God has not punished us as our sins deserve, that Jesus stood in our place. And that's why we call the gospel good news, that God has forgiven us if we trust in Christ, by faith. One thing that you hear oftentimes in fan circles, people like us that just love the game, is people have bucket lists when it comes to sports. For a big college football fan like me, if you're like, what's your bucket list? I'm not going to bring up going to Europe or going to see the pyramids in Egypt or going to cruise down the Amazon River. Those things don't even pop in my mind. You might think that's sad. We're football fans. What do we say? I want to go to a game at Lambeau Field in the wintertime, in Green Bay. I want to go to the I want to go to the Ohio State Michigan game. I know you've been to a lot of these in your work. You've been to a lot of these stadiums, but I'm such a college football nerd. I want to, on my bucket list is Lehigh Lafayette and Harvard Yale. Like, I want to go to those rivalry games. I want to go to Amherst Williams. I want to go see these historic rivalries. I've never been to the Red River River Shootout. I've been to a whole lot of games, a whole lot of stadiums all over the country, but I've never been there. But one thing in my role as a pastor is I walk into the room of a lot of people who are dying or who have lost someone. And especially if I go into a hospice room or go into a hospital room and somebody knows the end is there, but they're still coherent and able to have a conversation. I have never had someone bring up their bucket list to me. I never had someone on their deathbed go, man, I never got to go climb Mount Everest. Or man, I never got to go name that bucket list item. The whole time, they want to talk about? They want to talk about heaven every time. And that's what they want to talk about. And that's just fascinating to me. That's the conversation. That's what they want to engage in. It's just conversations about that. So if the bucket lists are harmless. They're fun. It's okay to have them, but it's amazing how much it really I've never met someone in my life in hospice or with a terminal cancer diagnosis that wants to have a conversation about, man, I never got to not one time in all my years as a pastor. Every single one is about they want to talk about their family. They want to talk about heaven. Like those are the two things. So it really shows us at the end oftentimes what it means to actually be heavenly minded. So just realize that all the things that are fun for us in this fandom and this almost obsession in our culture of college football and NFL football and all the things that are of sports, just know that they're of no comparison whatsoever, to actually knowing Christ. As long as it takes people being at the end to actually realize that. I'm not trying to be a broken record, but I'm still lifetime of counseling in death situations, dying situations. Have never heard a bucket list brought up one time. It's always been about family and about heaven.
Yeah. What's interesting, that's so good. Man, I wrote it down over here because it's like that's exactly right. And that's exactly right. And I don't have near the level of experience of having been in those difficult situations as you have, but even in the few that I've been in, there's not any kind of a thought of that. It's all about eternity at that point, which makes me think to myself, that's what our focus ought to be most of the time anyway. It's
Yeah,
Colossians
definitely.
3, right?
And God gives us things to enjoy in his common grace. So I'm thankful we have things like sports, like if it's your kids' sports they're playing, all the way to being a fan on a Saturday night of your favorite college team or Friday night lights, your local high school. I mean, God gives us things to enjoy, and I'm grateful for that. But ultimately, it's kind of Philippians 3, nothing compared to knowing Christ.
That's right. And I'm glad you brought up Philippians 3. I was thinking of Colossians 3. If you've been raised with Christ, you seek the things above where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. You set your mind on things above. So you seek it with your heart, and then you set your mind, you focus on it, on the things above, on heaven, on eternity, rather than on earthly things. And that is not to say that going to Michigan Stadium for the big house for Ohio State, Michigan is a bad thing to do, or having that as a bucket list deal, or, Red River Shootout or whatever, or Everest. Or I would like to travel the entire length of Route 66 with my son and my dad.
Well, that'd be a fun trip. Can I get in the back?
It'd be a long trip, but
Can I invite myself on that trip?
you can come on any trip with me. I mean, you can come on the Miami at SMU trip with me on Saturday if you want, if I go up there.
Hey, we went to TCU Baylor when TCU had an interim coach, Jerry Kill, who is now the right-hand man at Vanderbilt. And I think the key to a lot of the success there, to be honest, not taking anything away from our guy, Clark Lee. And we saw TCU upset Vanderbilt with Chandler Morris, the UVA quarterback, and they stormed the field.
They did storm the field.
Yeah.
Gary Bohannon threw a pick as they were moving towards what would have been the winning field goal, I think, if I remember right. He was the Baylor quarterback. Yeah, we went to that game in Fort Worth together, and it was good stuff. But as much as that's a fun memory, I love what you're talking about. It's like all of that stuff is, and I'm talking about let's take college football out of the equation, because as much as we love college football, one of our deals is enjoy it, but don't make it ultimate meaning. It's not nearly as important as your family. It's not nearly as important as these other things. All of those things pale in comparison to the importance of, Christ. Are you in Christ? Have you been raised with Christ? Right? Colossians 3. That's what matters. And if and when you find yourself in hospice, you're probably going to be like the people that Dean's talking about, and you're not going to be thinking back to A, all the things I did and all the bucket list items I checked off, and B, all the ones I still have to check off. You're going to be thinking either eternity's coming and I'm set, this is great, or you're going to be thinking, what's eternity? What's up next for me in eternity? Am I good? And one of the things we want you to know is you can be good with God because of what God's done for you.
Yeah, you can know you're right with God. You can know that.
Right. And you don't have to work your way there because you can't. It's God's work. It's God's work on your behalf. And so we want to talk to you guys about that. If anybody wants to talk with us about that, we always want to do that. You can reach us at gridirongospelpod@gmail.com or on Twitter at Dean and Sarah or at George Schroeder. So please feel free to do that. And I just, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because bucket list items are something that, man, I've got them.
Oh, sure.
You've got them.
Fine. Yeah.
Everybody's got them. Nothing wrong with them. Nothing wrong with them. And nothing wrong with, working through them and trying to achieve them. As long as you're not doing it at the expense of anything else, it's great.
You can do it for the glory of God.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And enjoy family, the good gifts he's given us.
That's right. I love that. So, I mean, do those things with your sons, with your daughters, with your spouses with your dads, all that stuff. That's great. With your friends, do it for God's glory, but enjoy it, whatever it is, right? Friends, friends who want to play St. Andrews, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I'm wired and you are for sports, so we think that way, but there are so many other type of things like that are bucket list. People want to, visit Europe or whatever. Great.
On your deathbed, you're not going to go, dadgummit, I didn't get to go to the Kentucky Derby.
That's right.
You're going to instead want assurance of where you stand with God.
Absolutely right, man. I'm so glad that you talked about that. One of the ways you can that in order to know where you stand with God, you have to know what He did for you, and essentially the kindness of God, the grace of God, and His love for mankind appeared in the form of Jesus, and Jesus lived a perfect life to pay the penalty, and then died to pay the penalty for sin, which all of us have committed. And that's why we're separated from God. And so He died to pay the penalty for sin. He rose again, conquering death. And the Bible says if you'll turn from sin, if you'll trust Him, if you'll believe in Him, you'll be saved. And then your life is transformed. Your heart is transformed. You go from death to life. And now you're good with God. It's that simple. And we want you guys to do that if you haven't. Please just right where you are. We'd love it if you pray. And if you want to talk with us, we want to talk with you about it for sure. So gridirongospelpod@gmail.com. Well, hey, man, this has been a good show. Obviously, the first half was dominated by coaching moves. And so the
season, that's football right now.
So the one reminder I want to have is it's easy for people to just sort of either look at it with glee if it's your rival's coach going down, or you got tired of your coach, and it's easy for us. And you mentioned this a couple weeks ago. I don't know if it was when Mike Gundy was let go, or when it was after it was with James Franklin getting let go. It's easy to forget that there's a real human toll here. First, that coach is made in God's image, and all of his assistants are made in God's image too, and their families are made in God's image, and they've been working really hard to try to get their teams to win. They want to win more than you do. But there are real families and real lives that are now uprooted at Baton Rouge because, almost all the assistants, maybe all of them will be gone.
The whole office is going to be cleaned out in a couple of weeks.
And so support personnel, all sorts of stuff. The next guy comes in and wants his own people, and that's understandable. But anytime a coaching change occurs, man, just make sure that especially at your outward expressions of it are kind. And if you can't say anything kind, like your mom would say, don't say anything at all. But inwardly, what's our heart? Do we at least recognize that this is a tremendous upheaval? And if you've ever lost a job, you understand what that's like. This is a tremendous upheaval, and it's embarrassing for the coaches. There's a whole lot of things going on. It's like, put yourself in those shoes.
And the answer is not, they got a lot of money. I mean, okay, that doesn't solve anything. That does nothing for their third grade kid who has to move and leave his friends.
So here's my quick suggestion to you. When you feel that way, just sort of the general college football way, whether it's the thing that happened across the country and you're just sort of thinking about it with glee, or when it's the coach who disappointed you, when you feel that way, if you're a Christ follower, why don't you step back and say, I just want to pray for that coach. Just pray for him, because, man, it doesn't matter if they know Jesus or not know Jesus. They're going through a really hard time. I mean, it does matter if they know him or not. I'm just saying they're going through a really hard time either way. Yeah. So why don't you pray for him? Pray for Brian Kelly. Pray for Brian Kelly. And I said earlier that I didn't think he was a great guy in the way he seemed to comport himself around people, certainly publicly with the cameras on. And I didn't know what that meant in the background, when the cameras are off. And I stand by all that. But as I said that, even in the first half, I'm thinking to myself, you know what? There's a way to be gentle about how I do that stuff. And I need to think about praying for him and his staff. So I may do that. I'm going to do that. So, Dean, anything else?
No, that's great. I think you well said. It's a good conclusion there to our time together.
All right. Well, hey, man, as always, it's been fun. You can visit us online at gridironandthegospel.com. Find us on Twitter or Instagram at gridiron_gospel. And I said earlier, reach out on Twitter at George Schroeder, at Dean N. Sarah. Email us at gridirongospelpod@gmail.com. And be sure to rate, review, and subscribe in your favorite podcast app. Just search for Gridiron and the Gospel or follow the links on the website. We're also on YouTube. Some of you guys have figured that out. I'm really sorry for you, because you see our mugs too.
Be better on radio for sure.
That's right. I used to be, I used to think I have a face for radio and a voice for newspapers. And then I have to explain now that joke, what's a newspaper? Well, that was something anyway. But we're on YouTube. You can search for Gridiron and the Gospel. You'll find us there. And then you can look at Dean's Florida room and you can see my office background and we'll go from there. But tune in next week for more Gridiron and the Gospel, a faith and college football podcast.